That was really annoying. It was really nice and sunny, and I was thinking, I'm in a good mood. I'm going to start filming. You can see how nice it looks over there. Well, kind of, it was like nice, and then suddenly this has come across, and look at what's over there. That looks pretty. That looks pretty. It's actually like really grey. You can't see on this, but it actually looks so much more greyer and darker than it does in the picture. But anyway, I was about to say I'm really happy because it's sunny and it's gone. Um, anyway, I am happy actually because I've got a card. Lost it. I've got my bus pass, which means I get free buses, which means I can actually leave the house. And knowing me, I'm probably going to just use it to go to the charity shop, and then I'm probably going to come back with a whole bunch of junk. I say I don't go shopping, and I don't really shop, but I do charity shopping, and I buy stuff if I feel like it's incredibly cheaper than what it's actually costing. But yeah, today I was thinking about a lot of things, such as the decline of England and how it's massively fallen. I think the video of Tommy Robinson, there was a clip where someone like a politician was just saying how if there's a problem, people like to blame it on the immigrants. If there's a problem, blame it on the refugees, blame it on Islam. People like to do that, and they're not. I'm basically insulting them. It seemed more like though he was happier to attack these people rather than to say, actually maybe we should think about it from a more realistic or just a contemplating way, which is that maybe there's truth to it. Maybe this mass immigration from third world countries is actually the cause of the decline in our country. Maybe Islamic beliefs are the cause about why England is completely falling apart, and it is. These mass immigration and Islamic beliefs are the actual cause for the collapse of our economy, and I can explain it because I feel like that's a good point. So I've just made like I think my next page is going to be about the decline of it. You shouldn't just insult. If something bad's happening, you shouldn't just insult people who are exposing the problem or who are perhaps blaming on someone. There might be some people that are heavily attacking the immigrants or the migrants or the invaders. There might be people that are doing that, and you know what? You can't just say, okay, they're being very aggressive, let's just call them aggressive far-right people. Maybe there's some truth in what they're saying, and I think there really is. So you have to kind of see it from a more calm way. Is there truth to it? Let's actually analyze things and study it to work out why there's a decline. I mean, if these countries are not working, there's obviously a reason why they're not working. Now, if you're going to bring 6 million people from Bangladesh and 6 million people from Somalia or all over the place, and you're going to start bringing them into the country, then you're going to expect that our country is going to start becoming more like a third world country. You can't just expect to bring these people in and then just get them to start acting like us. If you go and get a skunk or something and you start treating it like a cat, will that skunk start acting like a cat, or will it likely just do that stuff in front of you? It probably will. If you treat a skunk like a cat, maybe it will become more like a cat, but at the same time it's not a cat. If you get a violent bulldog and you start treating it like a puppy all its life, you might find that it does become more aggressive. Why? Because there's something in its sort of DNA and in its system that has made it a certain way. And if you start taking a whole bunch of people from third world countries, okay, they might come here and they might find that some of them can immigrate. That is the case. There are some people who can immigrate quite well into the society, and you wouldn't know that they are from a different place. But there's also a huge number of people that this is not happening to. So you can't just start attacking people who are saying, oh, it's not the immigrants' problem. Why? Because this person's an immigrant and this person isn't fine. You have to look at the number of it. If 100 immigrants have come here and 80% of them are on welfare and not doing okay, and if like a good portion, 40% of them are in prison or something, you can't just look at the 10% that have immigrated fine and say there's no problem here, because obviously there is a problem here, and you have to start looking at the facts and stop just attacking people who are saying things that you don't agree with because you've got one or two friends. I am aware that there are a couple of people from Pakistan that are okay, that Ben Hur guy is an example of someone who looks British, sounds British, and is very English. You know, he seems very like a typical English politician. Whether that be good or bad, it can be both, because sometimes they do things right and sometimes they do things wrong. But you know, you can't just look at the couple of good ones and think they're all fine. You know, I have been doing massage for a very long time, and a lot of people are Asian, a lot of people are perhaps Islamic as well, and I can't just say that they're all fine because the ones that I've seen are fine, because in reality I'm charging £50-60 an hour. The people who can afford this are going to be a certain type of person, hence maybe I'm just attracting better people to me. Hence, I can't class all Asians as based on the few that I've seen. Why? Because the few that I'm seeing are people that are happy to come to me on the phone call that we've had and the small discussion that we've had, and they're happy to pay a certain amount. And there's plenty of Islamic people that probably don't have any money in their name, hence aren't going to be the types that are spend money. You know, I wouldn't spend a huge amount on a £50 massage. Why? Because I've kind of been brought up. I think it's not that I was brought up in poverty. It was more the trying to get onto the housing market. Buying a house was like pretty much the only thing that I really wanted to do, and so having to come out of uni only to find that I can't get a job. I feel like light is bad. I can't get a job. I can't buy a house. Buying a house was pretty much the only thing that I ever wanted to do, and you made it completely impossible. And because of that, I now have quite severe mental illness because of that, and because of the trauma that I faced on that. I don't feel like I can really spend proper money on stuff, because I feel like even if I did have become rich, even if I did start having the money, I'd still have the sort of memory of feeling like I don't have money. So this kind of includes. It includes a type of undesire to want to spend money properly on. I'm just going to try and make the lighting a bit better. Don't know if that helps, but it doesn't help at all. But yeah, there's the first one is too much immigration from poorer countries. You know, if you start bringing a poorer country is a poorer country because of the people in it. The people in it, if there are some really bad people in there, you know, you're going to try and bring the best ones here, but by bringing the best ones here, you're actually just making that country less likely to be good or successful, because this is really annoying me. This light is, yeah, like that. Oh, that's better. Okay, if you start like bringing a huge amount of people from a poorer country into our country, you know, the poorer country is going to suffer a bit, because these people probably could have helped their country better, and because they're not helping their country, they're trying to help our country. Well, how are they going to help our country? Because if they're actually just spending their time thinking, wow, I'm so glad that I'm out of there, but there's some good people in there, you know, they might actually want to go into the Home Office and start bringing all these people into our country. They might start thinking, oh, there was this person at my school, I want to help that person, let's see if I can invite that person in. And therefore you start getting an influx of people wanting to come to the country, and they've all come from this, you know, if you help a bunch of ants by saying here's the sugar, you know, the ants are just going to try and bring huge amounts in. Now, if you hated your country and wanted to leave it, then you probably wouldn't bring that many people in. But if you still have that sort of desire to want to help your own country, which you probably will have, because you would feel a sort of loyalty towards your country, because this is where your family is, this is where your history is from, you know, you'd probably want to bring them into your country too. And if the reason why a country is shit is because the people in it are shit, then the more people that you bring from these countries into your country, the more it's going to fall and decline. So too much immigration from poorer countries is definitely a part of the problem. There might be also people that didn't have healthcare, didn't have sort of dentistry or something like that. So when you've gone into your country and you found that it's a much cheaper, or perhaps they just have things that offering for free that they didn't offer in your country, you know, you might find that there is a lot of people that take up the health service and the free and all the free benefits that come with being in this new country, because they didn't get it in their old country. But because they didn't get it in their old country, you know, maybe they actually have more problems because it wasn't fixed. You know, you do start fixing problems when you're a child, you're not going to need to fix it when you're older. But if you don't fix problems when you're a child, you're going to find that there's a lot of people that actually need it, and it's going to be the immigrants that didn't get it but want it now, and they're going to start, taking up all the benefits that they missed out on because they weren't in our country. But the reason why they missed out on it because they weren't paying our country tax. If you've been paying tax all your life, you've been paying more into the system because you've been in it for longer, hence you deserve to get more out of it. So it's too many people from different countries is the main problem. There's, I guess, having too many kids. I think a lot of people are very deceived about having lots of kids, because they think, in the Victorian times I had a lot of kids, but a lot of kids means a lot of poverty, because the more kids you have, the mother can't work, or one of the parents has to stay home all the time to look after the kids. Under 3, they can't really work. And if a country becomes more and more dangerous, you probably won't even want to give your kids off to nursery if they can't even talk. So I've heard they've offered free nursery and stuff to kids much younger, which is a good thing, as it will help parents to work more. But at the same time, they might be worried about whether or not their child is really safe if their child can't even talk. There is those issues. But taking time off, I think genuinely people should take time off work if they have a child under the age of 3, because you need to be there, provide for the child, make sure the child is safe and not being abused or anything like that. And if you've got 6 kids and you have them every 3 years, you're going to find that you can't work the whole time, because you're always looking after a child under the age of 3, and you've got the older ones as well, and the older ones are just going to start living off the hand-me-downs. You're not going to be able to throw anything away because you're just going to pass them down from one child to another. You will have to buy new things occasionally as things break and stuff, but you will find yourself becoming poorer and poorer because you can't work. You only have one salary, and one salary means that you might, one person is expected to pay for the rent or mortgage, and you won't be able to go on holidays, you won't be able to go to restaurants, you won't be able to, people that have large families, going to a restaurant, if every meal is £20, that's incredibly expensive if there's a whole bunch of you. If you're under 18, you probably won't be able to pay your share or something. And even if you are over 18, my dad used to take me to restaurants once a week throughout until the age of 26. While I was in London, he always took me to a restaurant once a week, and he always paid for everything. Now, if I had 3 or 4 other brothers and sisters, he probably wouldn't have wanted to pay, for my meal and their meal every single time. So I would have had to start paying for my own stuff, and that probably would have got me into the system of paying and stuff, getting into the habit of paying, rather than just expecting him to pay. But at the same time, I feel like if people have too many kids, they're not going to be going to shops, they're not going to be going to restaurants. My dad used to go to a restaurant every single day, so he never cooked in the house. So going to a restaurant was a typical thing, and that was just part of his normal tradition. He would have some sort of bun in the morning, and like a roll or something, and then go to work, perhaps buy things at work, perhaps buy things on in the station, in the train station on the way to work, have a lunch at work, and then have dinner in a restaurant afterwards. But things like this keep the economy going, because you've got people constantly going into restaurants. I've noticed that there are very few restaurants in Birmingham. Most of them are cheap takeaways, and if the reason why is because you've invited a huge amount of Islamic people into the country, people who have 6 or 7 kids, women who don't work because it's not part of their religion, people who just have loads and loads of kids, and therefore have become very, very poor because they're trying to save up for university fees of their kids, or probably don't even go to university. If you have 6 kids, you can't pay for their university fees, so they're going to have to expect to rely on themselves. You're not going to be able to help them financially because you've got too many of them. So people living in poverty, and the rise of poverty is going to grow if people have more than 2 or 3 kids, and if you can't afford it. If you have lots of kids, you probably can afford it, but if you don't have a good job, if you don't have a good salary, and also if you start breaking up with your partner, or if your partner starts cheating or becomes abusive or aggressive or violent, if you have kids too young as well, is another one. It's going to affect your whole life, because you might have not chosen the right partner, and if you start bringing Islamic people into the country, you will find they have high birth rates, and high birth rates does equal poverty. The reason why people are more poor in impoverished countries is usually they're Islamic countries. I know there's some rich Islamic countries, but they're people that have oil. They're people who've dug things out of the ground and think that they own this oil money, and they're now billionaires, and they've got huge amounts of money to spend on the infrastructure because they've got all this money from the ground. But have they actually worked? Do these people realize that if they were to come to England, we don't have oil, we can't offer them free benefits like they did in their countries, and they're going to start having kids regardless to whether or not they can afford it, because they seem to just think that having kids is more important than deciding whether or not you can actually raise them, look after them, pay for them. Housing is very, very expensive. If you got 1 or 2 kids, you could probably help them get on the housing market. If you got 6 kids, you can't help them, or you can help them a tiny bit, but it's probably not gonna, it's not gonna go anywhere. So having too many kids is a problem. Even traveling, if you've got 6 kids in a car for 5 people, you can't even go anywhere with all your kids. So you'll need 2 cars. That adds cost. And yeah, cars are very expensive, and people being brought up in poverty find that I think people who get used to being brought up in poverty also feel like they can't spend money. Like, it might not be so much if you're under 18. If you've had the first 18 years of your life with lots of siblings, and you can never afford anything, you're always getting hand-me-downs, when you finally get a job, you might actually start paying. You might find that this poverty that you faced has gone away, but I think if you come out of school or your home environment, start working, only to realize that you got a job that you don't want, a job that you can't pay off, a job that you don't want to, a job that doesn't earn much. If you've got a job that doesn't earn much, or if you've got a job that you just don't like, or a job that you want to stop, or if you can't get a job at all, or if you find that you're, I don't know, telly salesman and people are just telling you to kill yourself or something because of all that, you will find that if you're doing a job that you absolutely hate, you will become far more miserable, and money will be so much more valuable to me, because you would be like, well, in the last hour I've earned this much money. Now if I've spent if I've made £7 just to try and talk to people on a phone, only to have 10 of them tell me to go kill myself, well, that £7 is actually is huge amounts to me, because I know how much I've been working, how hard I've been working, and how much I've been making for every hour that I've worked, and therefore your sense of value sense of money, the value of how much you see money would change, and this will have a reflection. Because I'm trying to think, why did I never want to spend money when I was at uni? And I think I did some catering work, but it was exhausting, it was tiring, and I really didn't. I was okay, it wasn't that bad. I think it was after uni when I came. I only did that for about a year, by the way. I didn't do it for the whole time. I think when I came from my parents were fairly rich, and I just assumed that they were going to help me buy a property. So I went to Southampton hoping that they'd help me to buy this property, and it turned out that they were just lying to me. And I kept trying for 2 whole years to try and get them to help me buy it. There was a property that was about 100,000, but it turned out I had a low lease, and yeah, I was just pushing to try and get this 1-bedroom flat, and they were like, no. If I would have bought that flat, my whole life would have been completely different. My dad did have the money, he was just being selfish and didn't want to give it to me. But after I realised that wasn't the goal, it was kind of like, well, I'm in property, I'm doing interior design because I wanted to go into property development, but that kind of spanned my whole world around, because it's like, well, what do I do if I can't buy a property? And I guess I started doing catering, and I didn't like it, but I was okay. I think I was okay. But it was when I came out and I came back to London, and I realised that the Blue Arrow in London was just so much worse, because it was literally just a bunch of well, it looked almost like every single person was a sort of illegal immigrant or just a foreigner. The number of people that were not from England was almost all of them, and I looked very different, so I couldn't do that job. And then when I couldn't do that job, it was like, well, what else can I do? And I just couldn't get anything. So that's when the depression started coming in, because I started realizing that I can't get money, I can't make money, and everything just seemed like a false economy to me. And I think that's when I started forming a sort of mental illness towards not being able to spend money, because I wasn't able to earn it. But if you're bringing lots and lots of people from a poor country, or refugees who also have gone through, years and years of trauma of not being able to get a job, you might find that these people come in here and they don't want to contribute to the economy, because they've gone through this sort of mental illness of poverty, of extreme poverty, of not being able to get a job. Anyone who can go their whole life up to the age, before I did massage, I think I started around 23. But before 23, the only job I'd done was a catering job that I did for about a year and a half when I was in a year when I was in uni. I made a couple of £1,000 and that was it. Some of the shifts you'd make £65 for a 12-hour shift. That's how bad it was. It was probably even maybe 70. It was about 7. It was the minimum wage, whatever the minimum wage was, plus tax would take money away, and they would assume that you've made the 12,000. Even if you haven't made 12,000, they'll still take a quarter away, assuming that you have made over a certain amount. And it's just I think I had to try and get some of that money back. It was only a few £100s, but I don't really know what happened with that. I might have even given up because I was so depressed by that. By the time I realised that I'd been paying tax on something that I shouldn't have done, because I hadn't made over the amount of what you should be paying tax on. But yeah, if you're bringing lots of people from poor countries, even if they are okay people, if they've gone through years and years of not being able to get a job, they're going to come with sort of this instinct that I'm poor and I can't spend money on things. If these are the people that are contributing to society, they're not going to be contributing to society because they're going to be still feeling like they just don't want to go back into poverty. They don't want to you can make a couple of £1,000, you can make a couple of more £1,000. How much money do you have to make before you start realizing I actually have money that I can spend? If you've gone through 3-4 years of being on the dole, and then you start earning massage or doing massage, start making money through some sort of source. How much money do you need before you actually feel safe enough to be able to spend money? I did learn to spend money, but it was always on like extreme reduced I could only spend if it was it was very cheap, if it was very low compared to what the original price is. But yeah, people like me would not be contributing much to society through the economy because of the trauma of having to be on the dole for such a long time. And so if you're bringing in all these refugees, you could be like, oh, don't be racist towards refugees or something. Well, it's like, if you've gone through years of not being able to get a job, and not being able to feed yourself, not being able to feed your kids, and you just bring them into this country, and how much money do they need to start saving up before they actually start recovering from this sort of trauma of poverty? I don't think you think of it that way. Maybe if they're stupid, they might just start spending the second they get money. Yeah, unintelligence is a reason why poverty comes. People spending their money on stupid things, thinking that spending £20 on cigarettes each week is a good idea, even if you literally can't afford your rent and stuff. There's a lot of people who are stupid, spend their money on the wrong things. But yeah, an economy works when you've got people who are actually, in society, contributing to society, and are happy to both make and buy. Now, if your goal is just to have kids, you're going to not be able to work, and then therefore the whole process of earning money and spending money just isn't there. If you aren't going to restaurants, a lot of Islamic people don't usually go to restaurants. There's this tradition of the wife has to make all the foods and prepare all the stuff. So Islamic culture actually teaches people that women should be in the kitchen making food for the family, and therefore, how are you going to get all the restaurants to be full if you're bringing lots of Islamic people into the country, and these Islamic people are just cooking in their homes because that's part of their culture? And how are you supposed to have a culture full of hard-working people when you're bringing in people who are sort of brainwashed into thinking that only males should work? That's half the salary that the family's going to get. Where are they going to get this extra money from to help buy things? And it's also niceness as well. Sometimes you walk down in England or just anywhere, and you like seeing nice houses, look good, maintain, people have good gardens, people have nice fronts, if there's some paintwork that's broken off, people think, I've got some money, I'm working, I want to spend money on making my home look nice. And if you start inviting people into your country that just don't appreciate actual beauty, don't appreciate their house looking nice, their front garden looking nice, if you brought more of these people in, more of these houses will start falling apart because they don't value looking nice. Now, another thing is if you've got a whole house and only one property looks odd, that person might actually think, all the paintwork on all these houses look good, but the paintwork on mine looks bad, so I'm going to go and pay someone to make my paintwork look good. If on the other hand, so they would be encouraged to make their property look good. But if on the other hand things were the other way around, and 5 of the 50 properties were looking amazing and a couple of them were looking like shit, more people would be like, that one looks way worse than mine, so I'm not going to bother doing the paintwork. I'm not going to bother getting rid of all that muck or that bird's nest that's just destroying the corner of my window. I'm not going to bother doing any of that. Why? Because that house looks worse. So, when you start bringing bad people that don't look after the place, don't care about how people are thinking when they're walking across and walking past your house, if you bring more of these people in, more people are going to be inspired by them and think, that house looks worse than mine, so I don't need to do anything. Whereas if you walked around and you thought, actually my house looks so much worse than everyone else's, that would actually motivate you or inspire you to make your houses look good. It's one of the things that I've noticed when I'm walking around London, that 10 years ago, you could walk around and just think, wow, I'm jealous. Everywhere looks so nice. Okay, there was always the house that was falling apart, but there were few. The number of houses that were looking like shit were very few. And now when I'm walking around London, it looks like everyone has just given up. A couple of people have tried to make their properties look good, but because of the growing poverty and people not having enough money, maybe people saying, I want to spend my money on my kids so that they can get into houses. People don't have enough money to actually make their properties look good, and they might want to make their properties look good, do up the paintwork, make the windowsill look good, or if there's got some weird stain on it on the sides, clean it up. But if you don't have the money to do that, you're not going to be able to spend the money on making things look nice. If you've got too many kids, you've got other problems to put your money in, and you don't have the money to do it on making your house or your home or your land. If you've got a couple of houses as well, if you've got a couple of houses because you need to earn so much money just to be able to afford basic things, you'll have more responsibility, but you'll have more costs, and you might not be able to want to spend money on the costs to try and make the properties look good. I'll stop and do a second one.